Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, so today we continue the reading on Venerable Mahāmoggallāna's story. So the last time where we left off, it was talking about how the pair of Mahāmoggallāna and Venerable Sariputta formed the most excellent pair of disciples, and the Buddha praised them often, and also the Buddha often mentioned that they are good examples to the community of monks and nuns. Okay, and so there were many instances where both Sariputta and Mahāmoggallāna played key roles as the Buddha's chief disciples. So today we're going to read a couple of Mahāmoggallāna Psychic Powers. So Mahāmoggallāna was known as not only one of his chief disciples, but also for his great psychic ability, second to the Buddha. So let's have a read here. In the eyes of its early Western interpreters, many of whom saw in Buddhism a rational alternative to Christian dogmatism, Buddhism was essentially a pragmatic code of psychological ethics free from the traditional trappings of religion. So people started to take a liking to Buddhism because it seemed more logical, it seemed more pragmatic, not so much like supernatural kind of thing, sort of thing. And in their understanding, the supra-rational side of Buddhism was dispensable, and the wonders and marvels so conspicuous in the canon and commentaries were not overlooked, were explained away as later interpolation. So people didn't seem to be too interested in things that weren't rational or weren't pragmatic in the teachings. But while it is true that early Buddhism does not ascribe the same significance to supernatural events as does Christianity, to insist on expunging the miraculous altogether from Buddhism is to tailor the Dharma to fit external standards rather than to accept it on its own terms. So again, here it's a commentary just trying to say that, in short, in brief, we shouldn't be too much on one side nor to the other. We should just see things as it is. And then, of course, see what we can take as learnings. So the Pali Suttas, as a matter of course, frequently ascribe supernormal powers to the Buddha and his Arhat disciples, and there is little ground, apart from the personal prejudice, for supposing such passages to be interpolations. Although the Buddha compares the miracle of psychic powers unfavorably with the miracle of instruction, he does so not to detract from their reality, but only to highlight their limited value. So even Bhante Vimalaramsi pointed out before, he said that as we progress further down the path, it is not uncommon for certain people to develop certain inclinations. Inclinations is probably a better word. I try not to say psychic ability too much because that sounds a little bit supernatural. More of inclinations. And Bhante did point out before that we should see it as merely something that is, isn't the main. It's not like we should be too hung up upon it, but rather, if we do develop such inclinations, it's more of a something on the side, or something that happened just as part of our practice, but we shouldn't be too hung up on or caught up on these things, because then what happens is if we get caught up on it, then again comes the whole attachment to it, the whole personalization to it, which then we have failed again to see the three characteristics of everything, of all phenomena, right? That every phenomena that arises is impermanent, is unsatisfactory, and is impersonal. And so when we constantly, in whatever we are practicing, constantly apply that constantly, and then when we see things arise, we just go, oh, okay, that's another phenomenon, just another phenomenon that arises, and we don't cling to it, and we don't get averse to it. We just see it arise and see it pass away, see it arise, see it pass away, see it arise, see it pass away, as with all phenomena. And as we continue to practice the 6 hours in that manner, then it becomes a little bit more natural. What happens is we're actually training our mind, a new habit, well, not a new, but we're retraining the mind, where we're retraining our mind, we're retraining the brain to go, in any phenomena that arises, get into the habitual tendency of the 6 R's, instead of the previous habitual tendency of immediately clinging to such phenomena. So that's the key thing that we need to constantly remind ourselves. And sometimes it can be tricky, because we do tend to lose our balance occasionally. And that's where it is important to have the Sangha community. So not just monks and nuns, but obviously the lay people as well. The community of support, so that we constantly remind each other of the path, what is important. And that support for each other is the Kalyana Mitta, is the spiritual friend that the Buddha says is so important in our practice, that we constantly remind each other and rely on each other and support each other, that, stick to what is important. What is unimportant, don't worry about it so much. It's there. We don't deny it's not there. It's there, but we neither cling to it nor push away, get a burst from it. Okay. So nevertheless, when the suttas are considered in their totality, the clear conclusion emerges that the acquisition of paranormal powers was regarded as a positive good, which serves to enhance the stature and completeness of the spiritually accomplished person. So the suttas frequently mention a set of 6 paranormal faculties called the 6 super knowledges, which were possessed by many arhats. The 6 of these, the knowledge of the destruction of the cankers. Cankers is destruction of the hindrances, yeah, is the supramundane realization that all defilements have been eradicated and can never arise again. And this knowledge is shared by all arhats, being their guarantee of final deliverance. So it's a kind of realization, internal realization in themselves, that all their defilements are uprooted. And so none of these negative hindrances or habitual tendencies will ever arise. The other 5 kinds of super knowledge, however, are all mundane. So they include the knowledge of the modes of psychic power, knowledge of the divine ear element, the knowledge encompassing the minds of others, knowledge of recollection of past lives, and the divine eye, or the knowledge of the passing away and rebirth of beings. These faculties may be found outside the Buddha's dispensation among mystics and yogis who have mastered meditative absorption, and their attainment does not certify that their possessor has reached a state of true sanctity. There are neither requirements for nor indications of liberation. So this is quite important here to understand. It's not saying that, oh, in order to achieve the end, goal to attain arhathood, one has to acquire these 6 psychic abilities. No, that is not true. It may occur, it may not occur, depending on the inclinations of a particular individual. So it doesn't mean that, oh, we have to be careful, we have to be mindful and not think that, okay, if I need to attain arhathood, then I must make sure that I have these 6 supernormal powers. No, the key thing is the map, and the map is clearly defined in the Anupada Sutta, where Sariputta explained, clearly what he experienced through the different jhanas, and that's the map. And in that sutta, there was no mention of any of these 6 psychic abilities in Majjhima Nikaya 111 Anupada Sutta. So we have to be mindful of this. So there are neither requirement for nor indications of liberation. In the Buddhist text, even Devadatta, the most evil of the monks, had acquired such powers early in his spiritual career and lost them only when he tried to use them against the Buddha. So here you see, we can see that it's not to say it's not part of the map. It's just like if we had some certain inclinations, then it could be a byproduct. You can think of it that way. Yeah, for lack of a better word, a byproduct. So the Buddha was well aware of the dangers of being sidetracked by a fascination with psychic powers. For those whose minds were still fired by personal ambition, they could be a frightful pitfall, serving to enhance the delusion of separate selfhood and the drive for domination. And this is very true, because sometimes in terms of reaching arahathood, the sense of the I or my or mine or the ego is only really kind of cut after anagami stage. So even up to the anagami stage, one could still have quite strong sense of the I or my or mine, and that could then become the main block for an individual to attain arahathood. So we kind of, if we get, here was translated, if we get sidetracked by this, then it could be a pitfall. We could be stuck for a very, very long time, and we could be caught in that whole I, my, without even realizing it, unless we have a very good friend and we have trust in that very good friend to point it out for us. So for those who had seen through the unreality of I and mine and whose hearts were rich in compassion, such powers could be valuable tools in the service of the dispensation. Here, Buddha includes the 5 mundane super knowledges among the fruits of recluseship, in which his system of mental training culminates, and he also counts them among the benefits that come from the observance of the precepts. He declares that he himself had totally mastered the basis of psychic power, by reason of which, if he had so wished, he could have lived on until the end of the aeon. For the first generation of monks after the Buddha's parinibbana, the 5 super knowledges were also given high regard, being included among the 10 qualities that inspire confidence, which the orphan Sangha, means after the Buddha's passing, deprived of its master, used as its criteria for choosing spiritual guides. While the 6th super knowledge, the knowledge of the destruction of the defilements, is the fruit of insight, the 5 mundane super knowledges result from concentration. In the suttas, the Buddha usually introduces them only after he has explained the 4 jhanas. The jhanas are the prerequisite for the super knowledges because they transform the tone and clarity of consciousness in ways that open up the channels through which such knowledges become accessible. In its undeveloped condition, in its undeveloped condition, the mind is soiled by defiled thoughts and moods which cloud its intrinsic luminosity, drain its potency, and make it rigid and unworkable. But by systematic training in the practice of the 4 jhanas, the mind is cleansed and purified. When it becomes bright, unblemished, rid of defilement, malleable, wieldy, steady, and imperturbable, it can then function as a mighty instrument capable of uncovering domains of knowledge normally concealed from us by impenetrable screens. Those who have gained access to those hidden domains, like the Buddha and Moggallāna, will realize a vast extension of their experience in space and time. Their horizons will grow universal and measurable, transcending all boundaries and limitations. The Buddha particularly stresses a set of practices called the 4 roads to power, Iddhipada, or basis of success, as the means to winning the super knowledges. They are often described in the text by a set formula that runs as follows. Here, a bhikkhu develops the basis for spiritual power that possesses concentration due to desire and volitional forces of striving. He develops a basis for spiritual power that possesses concentration due to energy and volitional forces of striving. He develops the basis for spiritual power that possesses concentration due to mind and volitional forces of striving. He develops the basis for spiritual power that possesses concentration due to investigation and volitional forces of striving. Here, 4 separate mental factors are singled out as the main agents for developing concentration: desire, energy, mind, and investigation. To ensure that the jhana attained will not merely engender a state of calm, but will also serve as a repository of energy, each has to be accompanied by volitional forces of striving. And these forces build up immense psychic energy, which can then be tapped by suitable determination to exercise the supernormal powers. Okay, this is a fairly long commentary, but it serves as a kind of a prelude into the discussion later on the psychic abilities of Mahāmoggallāna. So to appreciate the traditional account of the psychic faculties, we must grasp the fact that the material world perceived through the senses, which today's physicists declare to be a manifestation of energy, is only a small portion of experiential reality. Beyond the domain of solid sensible objects, exists other vibrational levels which we can scarcely even conceive, let alone understand. Inklings of this wider reality occasionally trickle through the filters that sustain our rational, coherent picture of the world, appearing to us as a psychic phenomenon or as wonders and miracles. Because disruptions to the regular patterns of the natural order are so rare, we are inclined to regard these familiar patterns as laws, absolutely binding and inviolable. We then insist on ignoring whatever transcends our limited sense faculties, even when the evidence for those other forces is clear and compelling. But the universe as experienced by wise is much faster than that known by the common person. The wise can perceive dimensions of reality that others do not even suspect exist, and their insight into the underlying relations between mind and matter gives them a control over phenomena that defies the limits set by our consensual understanding of the world. The Venerable Mahāmoggallāna was the bhikkhu who had been most assiduous in developing and cultivating the four roads to power, and thus the Buddha named him the foremost disciple among those who possess the psychic powers. There were, of course, other prominent disciples who were highly skilled in psychic power, but they were usually proficient in only one or two areas. Thus, for instance, the monk Anuruddha and the nun Sakula possessed the supernormal vision of the divine eye. The monk Sobhita and the nun Bhaddakapilani could recollect their previous lives far back into the past. The monk Sagala was skilled in the exercise of the fire element. Chula Pantaka excelled in the ability to manifest himself in multiple bodies. And Pilindavacha was foremost in communicating with heavenly beings. Mahāmoggallāna, however, had a comprehensive master over the psychic faculties that no other disciple shared, not even the nun Uppalavana, who was foremost among the bhikkhunis in the exercise of the psychic powers. We shall now turn to what the Buddhist canonical texts relate about Moggallāna's supernormal faculties. We will not follow the familiar sequence of the 5 superknowledges, but instead will single out the particular faculties demonstrated by Moggallāna in incidents and anecdotes related in the suttas. Okay, so here the first of these supernormal faculties being discussed is the penetration of others' minds, or thought reading, or being able to read others' minds. So once on an Uposatha day, the Buddha sat silently in front of the assembly of monks. At each watch of the night, Ananda requested him to recite the code of monastic disciple, the Patimokkha. But the Buddha remained silent. So even till today, at each Uposatha full moon day, the monks will gather and they will recite the Patimokkha, the monastic discipline. So finally, when dawn came, he only said, "This assembly is impure," the Buddha said. Thereupon, Moggallāna surveyed with his mind the entire assembly and saw one monk sitting there who was immoral, wicked, of impure and suspect behavior, rotten within, lustful and corrupt. He went up to him and told him to leave 3 times. When the monk did not move, even after the 3rd request, Moggallāna took him by the arm, led him out of the hall and bolted the door. Then he begged the Exalted One to recite the Patimokkha, as the assembly was now pure again. Once the master was dwelling together with a community of 500 monks, all of whom were arhats. When Moggallāna joined them, he searched their minds with his own mind and saw that they were arhats, released and free from all defilements. Then the Venerable Vangisa, the foremost poet in the Sangha, realizing what had taken place, rose from his seat and in the Buddha's presence praised Moggallāna in verse. While the sage is seated on the mountain slope, gone beyond to the far shore of suffering, his disciples sit in attendance on him, triple knowledge men who have left death behind. Moggallāna, great in spiritual power, encompassed their minds with his own. And searching, he came to see their minds fully released without acquisitions. A third report tells us that once, while the Venerable Anuruddha was meditating in solitude, he considered how the noble path that leads to the extinction of suffering can be perfected by means of the four foundations of mindfulness. Then Moggallāna, penetrating Anuruddha's mind by his own, appeared before him through supernormal power and requested him to describe in detail this method of practice. Okay, so those were a few accounts where Mahāmoggallāna used his ability to read others' minds for the benefit of the Sangha. Then the second psychic ability is on the divine ear or clairaudience. So one evening when Sariputta went to see Moggallāna, he found that his features had such a strikingly serene expression that he felt moved to ask Moggallāna whether he had dwelt in one of the peaceful abodes of mind. Moggallāna replied that he had dwelt only in a coarse abode, but that he had been engaged in a talk on the Dhamma. On being asked with whom he had such a talk, Moggallāna replied that it had been with the Exalted One, with the Buddha. Then Sariputta remarked that the master was now dwelling very far away in Savatthi, while they themselves were in Rajagaha. So Rajagaha and Savatthi are very, very, they are many miles apart. Rajagaha is nearer to where Bodh Gaya is. Savatthi is on the other side. And those days when India was split into many different smaller kingdoms, they were even different countries. So we read about, so Savatthi is where Jetavana monastery is. So we read about these two settings very often. So Sariputta is saying that's not possible because the Buddha is in Savatthi, we are in Rajagaha. Had Moggallāna gone to the Buddha by way of supernormal power, or had the Buddha come to him? Sariputta is asking. Moggallāna replied that neither had been the case. Rather, they had directed towards each other their divine eye and divine ear, which enabled them to engage in a Dhamma talk on the mental faculty of energy. Then Sariputta explained that Moggallāna, being endowed with power so great, might be able to live through an entire aeon, like the Buddha, if he so wished. With the divine ear, Moggallāna could also hear the voices of non-human beings, deities, spirits, etc., and receive messages from them. So, for instance, a spirit had warned him against Devadatta, who harbored evil intentions toward the Buddha and was plotting against him. Okay. Then there is the the psychic ability of the divine eye, clairvoyance. As mentioned above, Moggallāna, with his divine eye, was able to perceive the Buddha over a long distance. So when they were in two separate kingdoms. The text describe other occasions when the elder made use of this faculty, divine eye faculty. Once, while Sariputta was sitting in meditation, a malicious demon, a yaka, pounded him on the head. Moggallāna saw this and asked his friend how he was feeling. Sariputta, who had not seen the demon, said that he was feeling generally well, but was troubled by a slight touch of headache. Then Moggallāna praised his strength of concentration, but Sariputta said that Moggallāna had been able to see that demon while he himself could not. Once, Moggallāna saw with the divine eye how King Pasenadi had been defeated in battle by the Lichavis, and how afterwards he had gathered his troops again and vanquished them. When Moggallāna reported this, some monks accused him of falsely boasting about his supernormal faculties, which is a disciplinary offense, making a monk subject to expulsion from the order. That's true. So according to the Vinaya, if a monk falsely makes a statement or falsely proclaims that they have certain supernormal faculties, then it is a disciplinary offense. They can be expelled. They can be asked to leave the Sangha. So it's fairly serious, okay? The Buddha, however, explained that Moggallāna had reported only what he had seen and what had actually happened. Above all, Moggallāna used his divine eye to observe the operation of the law of karma and its fruits. Again and again, he saw how human beings, through their evil actions that harmed their fellow beings, were reborn among the petas, miserable ghosts, and had to undergo much suffering, while others who practiced charity and virtue, basically generosity and keep the precepts, rose upwards to the heavenly abodes. He often reported such cases to exemplify the law of karma. These reports are collected in two books of the Pali Canon, one dealing with the ghost realm and one with the heavenly abodes. From this, it can be readily understood why Moggallāna was famous as one who knew the worlds beyond, as well as the workings of karma. The reports are too numerous to discuss here, but at least one of his visions recorded in the Samyutta Nikaya should be mentioned. So once Moggallāna lived on Vulture's Peak near Rajga, together with the monk Lakkhana, one of the 1,000 Brahmin ascetics who had been converted together with Uruvela Kassapa. So Vulture's Peak is a place that's quite high. It's still there today, and it's near Rajagaha. And you can go up. I was about to say cable car, but it's not really a cable car. It is cable, but it's more like seats, like the kind of like the type you see in ski resorts, similar. Well, at least when I was there many years ago, so I'm assuming it's still the same. So if people are interested, Vulture's Peak still, you can still go and visit them. So one morning when they had descended from the peak to go on alms round in the town, Moggallāna smiled when they reached a certain place on the road. When his companion asked him the reason, Moggallāna said that this was not the right time to explain. He would explain later in the presence of the master. When they later met the Buddha, Lakkhana repeated his question, and Moggallāna now said that at that spot he had seen many miserable ghosts flying through the air, as in the Peta realm, chased around by predators and tormented by various kinds of afflictions. The Buddha confirmed this as absolutely true and added that he himself spoke only reluctantly about such matters because people with skeptical minds would not believe it. Then the Buddha, out of his universal knowledge, explained what propensities and behavior had brought these ghosts to their present pitiable position. Travel by mind-made body, astral travel, means travel across different realms. Just as a person might bend his stretched arm or stretch his bent arm, so quickly could Moggallāna depart bodily from the human world and reappear in a celestial realm. So very quick, basically. Okay. And repeatedly, he made use of this capacity to instruct other beings and to look after the affairs of the order. Thus, he taught the devas in the realm of the 33 the factors of stream entry, and tested Sakka, their king, to determine whether he had understood the teaching about the extinction of craving. When the Buddha was preaching the Abhidhamma for 3 months in one of the heavenly worlds, Moggallāna appeared in that heaven, informed him of happenings in the order, and asked instructions. He visited not only the gods of the sense sphere, but also those of the Brahma world. Thus, he appeared before a Brahma deity who believed that there were no ascetics capable of entering his realm, and through questioning and supernormal feats, Moggallāna shook that deity's self-assurance. On another occasion, he appeared in front of a Brahma named Tissa, who formerly had been a monk and had died recently, and gave him instructions about stream entry and the realization of final deliverance. So that's on the astral travel. Then telekinesis, supernormal locomotion. Okay. Moggallāna also had mastery over what appears to be solid matter. Once the monks staying at a monastery were negligent, busying themselves too much with material trifles. Learning of this, the Buddha asked Moggallāna to use a feat of supernormal power in order to shake them out of their complacency and inspire them to return to serious striving. In response, Moggallāna pushed the building with his big toe so that the entire monastery, called the mansion of Megara's mother, shook and trembled as if there was an earthquake. So we read before the story of Visakha, Megara's mother, and she built this monastery for them, close to where Jetavana monastery was. And because it was so big, it was nicknamed the palace of Megara's mother, or the mansion of Megara's mother. Okay. So the monks were so deeply stirred by this event that they shook off their worldly interests and again became receptive to the Buddha's instructions. The Buddha explained to them that the source of Moggallāna's great supernormal prowess was the development of the 4 roads to power. Once Moggallāna visited Sakka in his heavenly realm and saw that he was living rather light-heartedly. Captivated by heavenly sense pleasures, he had become forgetful of the Dhamma. To dispel his vanity, Moggallāna used his toe to shake Sakka's celestial palace, the banner of victory, in which Sakka took much pride. This had a shock effect on Sakka too, And he now recalled the teaching on the extinction of craving, which the Buddha had briefly taught him not long ago. It was the same teaching that the Buddha had given to Moggallāna as a spur to attain arahantship. Now, once there was a famine in the area where the Buddha and his community of monks were residing, and the monks could not obtain sufficient alms food. On that occasion, Moggallāna asked the Buddha whether he might overturn the ground so that the nourishing substance underneath would be accessible and could be eaten. But the Buddha prohibited him, as this would cause the destruction of a large number of living beings, meaning it will kill a lot of the beings living in the ground and all that. So then Moggallāna offered to use his psychic ability to open a road to the Uttara Kuru country so that the monks could go there for alms. And this too, the Buddha prohibited. But all survived the famine unharmed, even without such supernormal devices. And this was the only occasion when the Buddha disapproved of Moggallāna's suggestions. Moggallāna's supernormal power expressed itself too in his ability to bring things from far distances by magical locomotion. Thus, for instance, he brought lotus stalks from the Himalayas when Sariputta was ill and needed them for medicine. He also fetched a shoot of the Bodhi tree for Anathapindika to be planted at the Jetavana monastery. However, when his fellow monk Pindola asked him to prove the superiority of the Buddha Sangha over the sectarians by magically bringing down a precious bowl that he had been hung up in town so high that nobody could take it down, Moggallāna refused, saying that Pindola himself possessed sufficient powers to do that. But when Pindola actually performed that feat, the Buddha rebuked him. A monk should not display supernormal powers merely to impress the laity. So this is actually one of the Vinaya rules as well. Okay, then there is the power of transformation. Although we have confined the preceding discussions to incidents mentioned in the Pali Canon, this account would be deficient if we did not mention what the commentaries regard as Moggallāna's most formidable display of psychic power, his triumph over the divine serpent, the royal naga Nandopananda. So this is quite one of the interesting stories that I think is also in the yeah, I could be wrong. Jayamangala, which is one of the chantings that, so Jayamangala, Jaya means victory, Mangala means blessing, Gatha is praise song, something like that, I think. And so in the Jayamangala, which is commonly recited during, how should I say, celebratory occasions or festivities or big events, then Jayamangala is one of those that are recited. And if I'm vaguely through memory, I think Jayamangala is like reciting this, how the Buddha triumphed over somebody, the Buddha triumphed over somebody, and then Nandopananda was one of those as well. Okay. Now I didn't realize that it's actually recorded in the Visuddhimagga. So that's interesting. So on one occasion when the Buddha, together with 500 monks, visited the heaven of the 33, they passed just above the abode of Nandopananda. And this infuriated the royal Naga, who sought to take revenge by surrounding Mount Sineru with his coils and spreading his hood so that the entire world was developed in darkness. Several eminent monks offered to subdue the Naga, but the Buddha, aware of his ferocity, would not permit them. It was only to Moggallāna, the last to volunteer, that he granted permission. Moggallāna then transformed himself into a royal Naga, a huge royal Naga, and engaged Nandopananda in a terrible battle of flame and smoke, drawing upon one power after another, appearing in a variety of shapes and sizes. He shattered his rival's defenses. In the last phase of the battle, he assumed the form of a Supanya, celestial eagle, the arch enemy of the Naga. At this point, Nandopananda capitulated, and the elder, assuming once again the form of a monk, brought him to the Buddha in triumph and elicited from him an apology. Okay, so we shall pause before, so the next chapter is talking about Moggallāna's previous lives. So I guess this chapter is really a collection of different stories or different incidents from various parts of the Sutta Pitaka, where Moggallāna was recorded to have used his psychic ability for the benefit of the Sangha. But as you can see, one example here, when we read, when they were living in an area that had was famine and there was not enough to eat, even the Buddha at that particular, because if what he's trying to perform actually would kill a lot of other living beings or would bring a lot of harm to other living beings, then the Buddha would disapprove of it. Yeah, and we also see other instances where the Buddha disapproved using psychic ability just to gain appraisal from the lay people. Yeah, even if it is to prove that the Buddha Sangha is superior over other sects. So here it's clearly highlighted how the Buddha viewed the use of these. Okay. So I'll pause here for a while and open for discussion. If anyone has any thoughts. Anyone would like to share what they think of today's reading? Or any comments? Luckily, it's not a very long chapter.
May, thank you for reading it. It's very interesting. It does explain the finer points, as you mentioned, where the Blessed One is saying and not to use the psychic powers inappropriately. It's very, very interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I liked how Venerable Nyanaponika and Hellmuth Hecker in their commentary did highlight a couple of things, mainly that it's not an absolute must in terms of on the path, on the journey to enlightenment, that it merely comes as a result of the practice for some. That's one thing. The other thing that I liked that they highlighted was we have to be very careful not to be too hung up if we do develop such inclinations, because that can become what's the word they use? Let me go back to, I like the word they used.
The obstacle.
Yeah, obstacle, but they used, let's go back. Frightful pitfall.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I liked that. Not just
Yeah.
pitfall, but frightful pitfall. I agree. Because it can be scary, especially if we cannot see it at all. And no matter, so frightful also if even others tell us, we don't believe them. So that can be very scary. We are bringing it upon ourselves. We are our biggest enemy. What else did I find their commentary was useful? Here and there are a couple of things. Was there anything else in particular that you liked about today's reading, Madam Nanda?
It's very, very interesting. I wasn't aware of all the facts you mentioned, but some of them through sutras I was aware. So it is very, very interesting. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. But yeah, I mean, we just need to remember that the most important thing really is the path and the Noble Eightfold Path. That's the most important thing. That is like our train, our vehicle. And that in that Noble Eightfold Path is the right effort. And that's really the core, what we strive towards.
Yes, I agree with you there. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Thank you for dialing in, everyone. So as usual, this recording will be uploaded onto YouTube if you wish to listen again. And not quite sure yet what's going to be next Sunday. We shall see. I have been asking, but many are a little bit busy at the moment till about May. Hopefully, I could get someone to come 4th of May. So if I can't get anyone available next Sunday, we can continue with the reading on Mahāmoggallāna's previous lives. Okay?
Gopinath normally have very interesting comments to make. Do you have any comments, Gopinath?
Maybe not today. That's okay, no problem. Okay, if there are no further comments, let us share some merit. Let me share. Let me go. Okay, and we shall share merits together. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that they have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, I wish you all a happy and healthy week ahead. Take care. We'll come back again next Sunday, same time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.